Alright, so I know the theme of the video is probably a little eyebrow raising, but hear me out. The Super Mutant is honestly one of the more fascinating species in the Fallout series. Strong, long-living, immune to disease and radiation. They're essentially the perfect ones to inherit the Wasteland, except for one glaring issue. They cannot populate their numbers, at least not without access to FEV. And given that FEV is a finite element, indeed, they're a doomed race. But what if they weren't? What if the Super Mutants could in fact reproduce? How would it happen? What would be the ramifications for the series if it did happen? And ultimately, would it be best for the Fallout series? Should Bethesda cure Super Mutant Sterility? Okay, so I do feel like I need to go over some background information in regards to misunderstandings about their organs, but I'm sure we can handle this in a tasteful and mature manner. There's 4 known species of super mutants. It's pretty well accepted that Mariposa mutants of Fallout 1, 2, and New Vegas keep their primary sexual characteristics. However, they do lose their secondary ones. There's a bit of evidence for this. There's the Master, who personally dipped many humans into the vats, has this line.
Preposterous!
The FEV2 virus doesn't destroy the reproductive organs of those it mutates.
Which seems to suggest that, while sterile, the organs are still existent. Fallout 2 has more, shall we say, riskier moments in the game, such as becoming a one-night stand if you lose an arm wrestling match against a super mutant named Francis, to allowing Marcus to participate in some paid recreational activity. There's even a super mutant couple arguing in Broken Hills, referring to each other as male and female titles. The male even wants to indulge in his, shall we say, particular magazine. It's also pretty commonly accepted that the Vault 87 super mutants are entirely asexual, lacking any reproductive organ. Here is the reason why. This terminal entry. But I do want to point out the wording. It states that the 87 mutants were losing most of their male and female indicators, and were transforming into an almost asexual state. While this goes against the commonly held accepted beliefs, I feel the wording is vague enough that it could potentially mean that the 87 mutants are like the Mariposa ones, in that sense. Moving on to the Institute and Huntersville super mutants, we really don't know anything about them. There doesn't appear to be any terminal entry or dialogue regarding their equipment. The Institute FEV lab has a couple of super mutants naked, but they're in their underwear, whether necessarily or not. Strong does have this line.
I don't have time for a dick measuring contest. What do you actually want?
Measure what? Strong confused.
And he refers to every super mutant as brother, but I'm not sure if there's really enough to go off of. 76 does have a female super mutant named Gail, but other than that, there's really not much else we know about them. It could be one way or the other. Never thought I'd talk so much about a super mutant's junk or lack thereof. What has my life become? Ah, you're still here. Good. As stated, super mutants are sterile, unable to reproduce at all. So, short of fighting even more FEV, the super mutants are destined to become extinct. This is arguably a mistake on the part of the original developers, Black Isle, because the super mutants have proved to be a rather popular species. So, how could it happen? Method 1. Canonizing Marcus's line in Fallout 2. Oh, I'm not done with this yet, apparently. Okay, so after letting Marcus have some quality time with a hard-working woman of the service industry, Marcus will say that he hopes she doesn't become pregnant. The Chosen One can question this.
Didn't your folks explain this to you? What? Where did you hear that? Nope. Well, not now. It takes a few years after being dipped to get the juices flowing again. Why?
Now, this was retconned as a joke in the Fallout Bible. That said, it doesn't really sound like a joke, at least not to me. Maybe others feel differently. Still, if Bethesda chose to ignore the Fallout Bible, at least in this regard, they could canonize the Get the Juices Flowing line, and allow at least the West Coast mutants to reproduce. Method 2. Canonizing the Midwestern Brotherhood's takeover of the sterility research. So Fallout Tactics is in this weird semi-canon state where the game isn't canon, but there are specific things that are canon. The things that are canon include the Brotherhood having a Chicago detachment, them using air fleet with a design for each ship that's very reminiscent of the Pridwin, and the Midwestern Brotherhood fighting the super mutants. However, one thing that hasn't been confirmed, but could potentially be so, is the Midwestern Brotherhood destroying the research of a super mutant scientist named Urkel, and preserving some of it to continue the research and attempt to find a cure, but in the future, using the cure as a bargaining chip against the super mutants. But again, this is tactics, and with this very loose limbo state of canonization, I'm not sure where this even falls. Method 3, which is the likeliest due to it not interrupting current canon, repurposed Van Buren's Born Ghoul experiment. This cut species of ghoul is exactly what it sounds like, ghouls that were born as ghouls. The cure for ghoul sterility was supposed to come from Dr. Sebastian, a mad scientist and a ghoul himself. Highly sadistic, terribly amoral, and zealous for the ghoul species, he had no problem conducting human experiments to achieve his goals. Eventually, he was able to achieve a 2% birth rate among ghouls. So, under this method, the new Dr. Sebastian, be him human, a super mutant, or ghoul, would be conducting super mutant and human experiments in the most horrific way possible, spending countless hours testing many people's lives with a single goal of finding a cure for their sterility. It could make for a nice quest where things are ethically questionable. Dr. Sebastian could make a powerful case about why the super mutant population needs to expand and the potential benefits it could bring to even humans. Still, his experiments are revolting. Humans and super mutants alike are treated barbarically. He has killed many people in search for a cure, and many more suffered during their times of being operated on or injected with a variety of unknown chemicals. In some sense, it would be like the Genophage storyline from Mass Effect, my personal favorite series, and much like Malin's experiments. Still, the storyline and quests aren't as important as the actual end goal. There are a number of things that could happen with an expanded super mutant population. I think it would depend on whether they're East or West Coast. West Coast super mutants would likely have some strict breeding control among their members. Thankfully, the second generation super mutants are incredibly obedient to the much more intelligent first generation. So it's very likely that many would choose to let only this first generation and Niken actually breed, in an attempt to produce more intelligent offsprings. That said, it's possible that there will be some first generation who would find this act very revolting and go against the policy, though perhaps some second generation would be giving breeding rights at the risk of the child potentially not acquiring intelligence. It would be a pretty small gene pool if it was only first generation. The East Coast super mutants are another matter. It's actually pretty hard for me to even imagine them being tolerant enough of a scientist working to cure the sterility to be part of an experiment. Particularly the Vault 87 mutants, assuming they're not Ken dolls. The Institute ones, maybe. They appear to be more intelligent. They at least have a better understanding of technology enough to utilize them. Either case, the East Coast mutants are interested in getting their numbers up, always looking for new, green stuff. Whether they can understand the benefit of birthing is another matter. Still, let's say they were cured. I could see the East Coast super mutants have an explosive birth rate, though lower survival rate. There's a chance that some clans would have a strong fighter only thing going on after the low survival rates became apparent. After all, they don't mind pruning out the weaker mutants, going by the words of Fist.
You only kill the weakest of us! It only makes us stronger! If they cannot kill one puny human, they are less than nothing!
As for the respective wastelands, assuming the East Coast mutants don't change much, it likely would be pretty bad news for the humans. The humans are probably banking on the mutant species just dying out. Though, maybe they actually find more of a power struggle between each group. Groups breaking out, starting more tribes, some members of each tribe amassing birthing rights, creating envy. It could actually probably cause a number of skirmishes, if not outright tribal war among the super mutants. It would be pretty interesting, especially if, after a few generations, they become smart enough, or at least desperate enough, to begin requesting human assistance in their war efforts against other super mutant tribes. I feel like the East Coast super mutants would have the biggest chance to develop as a society if they started to view each other as possible oppositions and not just humans. Right now, they're spiraling to a death sentence. They can't really afford to fight amongst themselves. But if they can populate their numbers, maybe things would be different. One clan leader trying to make rules about his right to breed over others, super mutants leaving clans because of these rules, or even fighting for the right to breed. It could be even more interesting since female super mutants are just as powerful as their male counterparts. West Coast mutants, however, I'd imagine would be a lot different. I feel like they expand on the roles they currently have, where they're just a people trying to get by. That being said, being able to naturally populate their numbers, they may be able to form their own nation. But perhaps their numbers are so low it would be a real challenge. It could be that many super mutant communities get established within NCR territory with some special privileges and secondary governance. perhaps their own state. That said, it's also more likely that the anti-mutant agenda would be even more fierce than it already is. Perhaps this caused a number of super mutants to leave the NCR in droves, going eastward, maybe even east enough to come in contact with their cousins across the coast. Who knows? Regardless, it's quite possible that wildlife may find itself being hunted down a lot more regularly, as it appears that meat is very much an important part of the super mutant diet. And with the mutant population growing, the need to get more meat will become even more important. Thankfully for the West Coast, we already know that they're hurting. The East Coast is another matter. They'll either need to adapt and learn to herd, or they're going to find themselves facing starvation. Yes, they may even hunt so much that the population around them is incredibly reduced. Though perhaps they may unintentionally, mind you, become a wall against the growing Deathclaw population. The apex predator has no natural predator themselves, and lays quite a number of eggs. Perhaps the East Coast super mutant would become that predator. It could actually be a boon to the human settlements in that region, but maybe the trade-off isn't exactly worth it. Of course, this is all hypothetical. So why do it? Why make the super mutant capable of breeding? My main reason? Development. Continue their story without it ending in their death. As of now, that's simply where they're headed to. Extinction. No matter how much FEV seems to make their way into the various wastelands, without a stable way of repopulating their numbers, and with the amount of super mutants we kill, it's just amazing that there's any left. This would make migration be a viable option, and not have to resort to having FEV be part of each and every new game. They just moved out and made new families. Anybody who watches my videos know that I'm pretty hard on the super mutants in the East Coast, because all I can see them as are just raiders. With breeding becoming an option, the East Coast mutants may become a bit more established culturally. So they're more of a people and not just something we shoot at, not just raiders. Who knows, they may adopt a new deity and form a religion. They may come up with new forms of governments, albeit pretty simple ones. And may even start creating primitive forms of art. You may be able to do quests for super mutants, trade with them, and even engage with them. They'd have a lot more purpose than just to be shot at. But don't get me wrong, we'd still be shooting at barbaric super mutants too, like we shoot at human raiders. There'd just be more to them. Also, the idea of a bunch of muscular green toddlers running around and causing mayhem is just hilarious. It's probably wishful thinking on my part, but I like to think that if going this route, Bethesda would actually make them something other than defaulting to muscular raiders. But why not? What would be the reason not to do this? The only big real reason that I can think of would be that it goes against the integral part of the original Fallout. Super mutants were the OG enemies, the perfect creature to take the Wasteland away from humans, to replace them, but they could not breed. And if they couldn't breed, they're destined to die out. And that's their story. It's sad, but it's their story. And if a new game had a mad scientist that came in and fixed their sterility, allowed them to breed and grow, well, you know what that would mean? That would mean the master was right.